Hi, today we're at the Mechtronix A320 unveiling of its full flight simulator that's being used by TACA, and I'm very pleased to have Garrick Ngai here today with us. He's an aerospace and defense industry analyst with Frost & Sullivan, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about your practice, Garrick, and give us a perspective on it.
Thank you for having me here today. I've been with Frost & Sullivan for the past 2.5 years almost, and it's an aerospace defense practice. Prior to joining Frost & Sullivan, I was a former Canadian Army officer, having served time at NATO headquarters in Norfolk, Virginia. And since joining Frost & Sullivan, my portfolio will include training and simulation for commercial and military applications, as well as military sea flyers. So I'm happy here today at Mechtronix to be talking about its flight training and simulation technology.
Great. Now I understand before that you were able to actually fly the flight simulator, and maybe you can give us a perspective on what it was like flying in that flight simulator.
It was actually my first experience flying on a flight simulator, I have to admit. Being a former soldier myself, I've never been able to fly, and I don't have a pilot's license. So speaking from a non-pilot's perspective, being able to step into a simulator and feeling the motion, the visuals, and the cueing of a simulator replicating real flight was quite the experience. Being the pilot's seat on the left-hand side, flying the aircraft, an A320, from New York JFK to Toronto Pearson, and with the motion feeling as though I'm flying a real aircraft was quite the experience, and speaks to quality of training and simulation technology today, and the package that Mechtronix has put together behind us today.
Very good. What's your perspective also on, Mechtronix is talking about true simulation, not stimulation through avionics boxes that technically reduces the costs of these types of flight simulators and makes them more affordable. What's your perspective on what that's going to mean for the aviation industry, whether it's flight training organizations or certainly airlines like TACA?
Well, you gotta remember the fact that we're able to replicate a lot of expensive, and I mean very expensive, avionics and aircraft parts by Mechtronix themselves. They actually have the manufacturing capability here on site. The fact that they can replicate it at perhaps a quarter of the cost, would deliver a lot of value and savings to the end user. And that's really the key thing, because the key obstacle to flight training and simulation, the commercial side, have been the cost of the simulators themselves. And the fact that Mechtronix has been able to successfully replicate very high-end aircraft, 320, Boeing 737, to a point where the pilots feel as though it's the real thing, and perform and act as though it's the real aircraft, but perhaps at a quarter of the cost in terms of parts. That delivers a lot of value to TACA or to any of its other customers that are interested in acquiring in-house flight training. It's all about the value.
Right. Well, not only cost is certainly an issue, but one of the issues too is safety. And what do you think about the ability of pilots to fly at home and also to obviously practice more and not just do recurrent training, but do continuous training? How important is that to an airline typically around the world, in your opinion?
It really is important right now in today's global airline industry. If we look beyond North America, if we look beyond all the bad news we've been reading the last 6 months, for example, if you look at the world at large, there is a huge pilot shortage internationally. And a lot of our pilots are retiring. They've reached retirement age. So we've got a lot of young pilots moving into the industry, and they're in their mid-20s or in their early 20s, and they grew up in the computer age, in the Nintendo generation. They understand video games, they understand simulation and artificial cueing. They understand this. And the fact that these new pilots are coming into the system, learning their curriculum on machines such as those behind us, it can actually do a lot of their initial training as well, and recurrent training subsequently on simulators like the one behind us. It speaks to a lot in terms of what's going on in the industry. And you gotta remember, more training and the better training that a pilot receives, and the higher in terms of fidelity and reality, the safer it makes the pilot. So at the end of the day, the flying public is safer because the pilots can learn and practice their mistakes on a simulator and not on a real aircraft.
Right. If we wanted to get some more information about Frost & Sullivan, where would we look for it on the web?
Please visit Frost & Sullivan at www.frost.com.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.